Welcome to Mac Football Forever again. This is a new series that we're doing called Offseason Mode, where we just hang out every week. Every Monday, we're going to have episodes just like this to catch up on some timely news information. I'm Alex Alvarado, as always. And, oh boy, as always over there, Caleb Carter. Looking buff.
Yeah.
Look at those guns. And I'm not talking about the finger guns.
All you got to do, brother, is wear the tank and show them off.
Do you think Frank Solich wears tanks?
Oh, you know he does, baby.
Caleb, this, like I just said, this is going to be a weekly thing where we just catch up on the news, all that stuff. We're going to have like a few other series go on in the off season to be more topic specific, I guess. But this is just going to be our space to just, hang out, to just kind of keep the flow of the show going and, catch up on things that may or may not have slipped through the cracks. And sometimes things are going to slip through our cracks too. So you better, one, wipe it for us, and two, hop into the comments and let us know what we missed.
Yeah, get your brain a bidet. So, yeah.
We have a lot of things to go over, though. We have, coaching news to go over. No one left. No one got hired, away from the MAC. No one got fired, anything like that. But we do have some coaching stuff to go over. We're also going to be talking about, some transfer stuff. We're not going to go over recruiting just yet. We do want to recognize that signing day, the early signing period, rather, did happen last week. And lots of classes got filled up with lots of talented players. We're not going to break it all down yet. We still have many more months to figure out what the rosters around the MAC are going to look like. So we are just going to save a lot of that for later. But still, there's so much more that we got to go over. Like we said, with the coaching, the transfers, guys leaving early for the NFL draft, guys graduating and just getting on with their lives. Right now we're on Selection Sunday recording this. The two teams, Buffalo and Ball State, they know that they're heading to bowl games. Everyone else is kind of preparing and reshuffling or trying to figure out what's good and keep that at least too. Looking forward to next year. Caleb, as we enter this period, what is weighing most heavily on your mind?
We've got a conference that it feels a little bit more, I think, wide open in some ways than it has in a couple of years. And that's not to say that, a couple, maybe 3-4 different teams from the West could win their division any given year. But I think we're heading into an offseason where you're gonna think seriously that like maybe 8 different teams could win the MAC next year. Mm-hmm. And that's an unfamiliar feeling for me as a fan, because I just go into any season usually expecting either the best team in the East or one of 2 teams in the West to have the best team going into next year. This year felt fairly wide open, but I still, in my brain, the entire last offseason was thinking it's going to be Buffalo, Western Michigan, or Toledo. That was just kind of what
it always eventually funnels down to a couple.
And sure, you could add in like Miami or Central Michigan, but still, I felt very strongly about a couple teams. This offseason, I don't think it's out of the question at all that Buffalo, Kent State, Miami, Ohio, any of those teams could win it. That Toledo, Western, Central, that any of those teams –
Eastern.
Yeah, sure. But that any of those teams are really going to have a good chance to be – 8-9 win football team next year, and maybe there's 4 or 5 9-win football games, assuming we can actually play a full schedule again. So this offseason, the moves that guys make, whether they choose to stay on another year longer than they would have due to COVID, or voids being left that maybe they weren't expecting, and new players coming in either through the transfer portal or through recruiting, could play a really unique role in this next year. What COVID has dealt us puts the outlook of this conference in a really peculiar place, just like it does a lot of conferences, just like a lot of teams. But I'm very interested in seeing what it looks like now. And then if we see any other changes after the FCS season in the spring, because don't forget, we're going to have spring football this year at the FCS level. So there's that I think actually could play into what the MAC looks like next year too. But it's just hard to guess that without having looked at some of those seasons. There's even like one guy that comes to mind we'll talk about later that already transferred from the FCS to a MAC program. But that's kind of where my brain's at. It's a very uncertain offseason, a lot to be determined still, and a lot of teams that should expect to be contenders next year.
let's start things out with some timely information. Probably the most pressing thing, some news that rose up with some damnation. The quarterback, David Moore, out of Central Michigan, he finally won his appeal over the NCAA, which tried to give him 2 separate one-year bans over the same, drug, the same drug that got him suspended the first time.
Yeah.
He claimed that, the substance that he was banned over, M3 metabolite turinabol. I never watched the documentary.
Bad joke.
He was banned for having that in his system. He claimed that, from what I remember reading, that it was in products that he bought at GNC. Anyways, he was suspended last year in 2019. And then after 1 year later, it was like, okay, is he allowed back? Nope. He got slapped again for still having it in his system, apparently. Day later, appealed it, won the appeal. David Moore is coming back to play quarterback for Central Michigan, and they very much missed him last year.
Yeah, and I think that we're in a peculiar place where David Moore's still going to be the favorite going into next season, but they've got a transfer coming in. They've got Daniel Richardson having the experience, and I actually wouldn't blame Daniel Richardson if he moved on and tried to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also got the experience that could win him the job next year.
Mm-hmm.
And so Central Michigan's going to be a lot better position. They should be in a lot better position going into next season at quarterback than they were this year. And that's actually kind of exciting given what they're capable of. We still got to wait to see a couple guys offensively if they're coming back for Central, but you have somebody like Lou Nichols back, an offensive line that, does the job, and guys that should be back on that spot. And then plenty of talented defensive players. I mean, Central Michigan, again, with a solidified QB spot is, again, you could predict them to win a MAC title.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, the worst that you get out of it is a more experienced QB2 heading into next year for Central. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
As far as the playing experience that Daniel Richardson and Ty Brock too, he was able to get his experience and made a few plays, like the one, it was like a 80-something yard touchdown run. Got to remember that. But good for David Moore. Hopefully you do well next year, minus 1 game that I can think of. But I think that's all I got to say there. Moving on to some bowl games, the MAC only gets featured in 2 this year. The Camellia Bowl, Arizona Bowl. The MACtion champions will face the Mountain West champions on New Year's Eve. Ball State versus San Jose State. It'll be a 2 o'clock kickoff on CBS. And also in the Camellia Bowl in Montgomery, Alabama, Buffalo's going to take on Marshall. So that's going to be some incredible MACtion for you. Love it when a MAC team faces Marshall, the team that should be back in the MAC. That'll be on Christmas Day, 2:30 ESPN. Looking at those games, we don't have to break down Marshall and San Jose State and act like we know, even 5 players on each respective roster right now. Sorry, we're pretty tunnel visioned. Don't care. What are you still looking forward to with those games? And I know that they're on busy holidays, so it might be hard for you to watch. I don't know what your plans are. You, Caleb, you at home. But still looking at the games, what are you kind of excited for?
It's very simple. For Buffalo, for me, that has the chance to be a really exciting matchup where they're expecting Jarrett Patterson to be back for that game and healthy, hopefully. It's a quick turnaround on Christmas Day, and it has the potential to be really fun. Buffalo's offense, if they can get back on track and finish the year strong, play like they have all year, being one of the best FBS offenses in the country, makes for a really exciting matchup again for a Marshall team that looked really good all year and then struggled down the stretch. If you're a Marshall, you're probably just hoping to finish the year strong and hopefully motivated. Hopefully that's where you see those 2 teams. As far as Ball State, San Jose State goes, San Jose State's like one of the best stories in college football this year if you can look past all the crud and the Crum and whatever. So, San Jose State probably shouldn't be playing in a season where they're not even allowed to play home games. They're traveling just to be able to practice and play games and whatnot. And but they finish undefeated. It's a program that does not have a history of success, period. And they're playing a Ball State team that also does not have a ton of recent success. And so it's an exciting. It's like you're looking at 2 teams.
It's one of those games you look forward to.
Sure, it's 2 teams that don't have a history of bowl success that want to be playing in this bowl game to show out and demonstrate on a national level what those guys are capable of. So in that sense, it's two teams looking to prove something still, even after winning their own championship.
Yeah, and just as a quick preview for me, Marshall was undefeated at one point this year until they faced a bowl of rice, which is a bunch of nerds. Buffalo is a nerd school, so
this is what they are. Like they're nerds.
Nerd. I thought you were gonna do one of those PJ Fleck things where you held up this is what progression looks like.
Marshall had such a weird season because we were talking earlier in the year about, like, I know what Alex said too, we're tunnel visioned, but like we're talking about like Marshall, we're talking about BYU, Coastal, Louisiana, Buffalo, Western as teams, like to the teams that the G5 could maybe threaten at the very end, and it wasn't realistic to see all those teams or even two of them have a shot in the end, and none of them even did. Buffalo didn't even have a shot, even if they won the MAC championship very convincingly. They weren't going to be anywhere close. And nobody in the MAC's going to get to carry the mantle in this current system because it doesn't reward winning in the MAC. And if there aren't non-conference games, like crazy good non-conference games, they will never get there again. You're never going to see a MAC team in the college football playoff as it stands now. So, topic for a future episode, I want to talk about a G5 playoff, but that's for another day.
Also in the actual news department, and it's a shame that I'm wearing this shirt, right now, but it was a gift. It was a gift, and I was excited to wear it for the first time because it came in the mail yesterday. George Barnett leaves Miami for Tulane after 6 seasons, somewhere along those lines. But, for still over half a decade, he was the team's offensive line coach and offensive coordinator. Obviously, incredibly instrumental for Miami and all of its success that, Chuck Martin was able to, to have under his name on the internet, I guess. George Barnett, took care of stuff on the offensive side while the defensive-minded head coach was able to establish the program. And Miami's done such a great turnaround ever since, Martin and all them were hired in. So even after Barnett was hired away by Tulane to be the O-line coach, all the Miami players that, he was directly over and instructing how to block for, Brett Gabbert and so forth, they came to, they hit the Twitter streets and they said, we love our coach. We're going to miss him. He's one of the best. And so it's really awesome to see, a coach move on and players, understand what's going on and still hope for the best and still see him as a human being and not, just settle for, oh, this is just a business. As much as sometimes is, you can see the real connection there. So it's going to be interesting to see how Miami goes about filling that coaching vacancy.
Mm-hmm.
But, and good for him to, find a new experience.
Yep. And the one thing I'll say about this move is that Miami does a good job of recruiting offensive linemen and developing them once they're there. And there's a reason that they can do that they can win like they do without superstar athletes for the most part on offense. They have guys that they've developed like Tommy Doyle and Godlewski, who is now in the transfer portal. They've developed some really good players, and they just do such a good job picking up really high caliber offensive linemen. And I think that even though Chuck Martin's a defensive guy, they rely on his pedigree and who he brings on his staff to like really haul in good recruits. And I think that if Miami makes the right choice at who they hire there, then they just keep on rolling in that respect. So it's a move that, it hurts the program, but it's good for him. And if I'm Miami, they're probably going to get another good offensive line coach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder, what kind of offense they want to shoot for, like knowing how much everything changes stuff. And Miami's not going to change the drum. It's still going to be a defensive-minded team, don't get me wrong, even if it hired Sean Lewis 2.0 as its next offensive coordinator, I don't know, or someone with like a very inventive playbook with, great pistol, triple option stuff that, probably came out of Coastal Carolina, somewhere along those lines. We don't know how Miami's going to fill that role, how it's going to, promote the play calling responsibilities. But it will be interesting to see, one, what the playbook looks like on the field, and two, how Miami kind of shifts its approach to recruiting and developing players to fit whatever playbook is next in line.
Definitely. And I mean, there's going to be a lot more coaching changes to, talk about during the off season. But I think right now, what's more interesting if we're talking about the MAC in general is what the names that came up for some of the recent searches, right? So we'll talk a little bit about the fact that Illinois had looked into Sean Lewis. Sean Lewis is a native of the Chicago area. He played high school ball up there. He has Big Ten experience. He played for Wisconsin. And eventually Brett Bielema was hired, who's another guy who's from Illinois. And I think Lance Leipold's name was actually brought up in that vein too.
I want to say Leipold's name was probably brought up more, and I want to assume that based on some of the reporting that I've seen out of ESPN's Adam Rittenberg, I think that Leipold was more favored or more considered for the job than Sean Lewis was.
Yeah.
But it also looked like Leipold, once his name was on the, once they had him on the phone, he was like, I'm good with where I'm at.
For sure.
That's what I'm assuming, but still that's, he's still in Buffalo, so he better feel that way.
Yeah. And if it comes down to it and coach in the a Big Ten school or another coach in the Midwest needed to hire somebody, Leipold would be a good choice given his recruiting ties and his ties in the industry out there. So I still wouldn't be surprised if Leipold takes a job like this offseason if something comes open, but I think it'd be more likely a year or two from now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lewis, since we've already brought up his name, right now there's only as of this recording, 3 current vacant FBS head coaching jobs: Arizona, Auburn, UL Monroe. Arizona, that's one where I'm kind of looking at to see if Leipold or Lewis or et al. get considered there. But I think Arizona is more of one of those jobs where you really need to know out west more, so I don't want to consider them too much. Auburn, it kind of sounds like they're either staying 1 in-house or 2, they're staying down south. And UL Monroe, who knows? But I don't really think, considering like the resumes that we've already gone over for why would Lewis and why would Leipold be good for this AAC job or ACC job or Big Ten job? It's because they're good about that footprint up there. None of those 3 schools that I just listed off exist in the Midwest, so I'm not going to think too hard there.
No.
But Lewis, still, having said all that, I believe Lewis's name was still included in the search for South Carolina before Shane Beamer was hired. To what extent, I don't really know. I don't know if, he was ever interviewed or called or very seriously considered. I don't really know the whole situation there. But still, he's not going to be coaching there because they already hired somebody.
Yep.
And also that South Carolina job is it's $2.75 million per year. And of the public schools in the SEC, it's the lowest paying one.
Oh, wait. There's a reason people leave to go to the AAC, even if people don't see it as that much of a leap. The money is a lot more. There's a reason guys like Rod Carey leave in NIU. When MAC head coaches have the chance to go be a coordinator, at a big school, we know why. The money, it's there. And
absolutely.
Yeah, but I'm sure we'll have more position coaches to talk about in the coming weeks. But for now, those are kind of what we've heard and what we've seen from MAC coaches.
Looking at, the players, though, in the offseason, I'm just going to lump this all in one. That way we can kind of get out of here somewhat early. We have players that are declaring for the NFL that are announcing that, or they're announcing that they're coming back, or they're announcing that they're transferring elsewhere. Sometimes they're announcing that they're transferring, then they declare for the NFL. We saw it with Tyree Jackson. We're seeing it with Manny Rugamba now. It's nothing new. It's a totally normal thing to do. But looking at all these players that, are in our news, who are you thinking about the most right now? We had already talked about in the last episode, we already brought up Dustin Crum and Caleb Huntley declaring for the NFL draft, or staying in Kent State and going to the NFL respectively, rather. My bad. But, who is weighing on your mind right now?
Well, so Bryce Harris coming back for Toledo, I think, makes a big difference. He can anchor that line again. And Toledo, they've got a lot of questions to answer this season, a lot of spots that got to get developed. And having somebody like Harris back is obviously a big boost for them. Otherwise, Alex is going to be as stoked about Tariq Speights just being a guy who's already been like, I'm ready to go next year already. And I feel like there's a lot of guys who got the experience this year for EMU that is going to pay big dividends for them. And they're going to have a chance to win some really big games next year. Other guys like Kyle Pugh, who's going to come back for what feels like a 10th year. Kyle Pugh's going to feel like the Perry Ellis of the MAC by this time next year. But, like, no, don't blame him. He's been through a crap ton of injuries. He hasn't seen them field as much as he should have, and he's, like, one of the most likable guys I've ever interviewed or talked to in sports, period. So rooting for him that, you know, he gets another degree, that he gets out of one more year what he wants to, and all the health in the world to him. And then Adam Gregoire for Kent State was already a grad student, and he's like, you know what? I like what Coach Lewis is doing. I like what this program's doing. I'm coming back, baby. I want to be here another year. So that's really big for a Kent State group that, as Alex has mentioned before, is really experienced already on the offensive line. And for somebody to set the tone early in the offseason, for Crum to say he's back, get one of those offensive linemen back, and then they kind of set the trend for, you know, they're going to have experience that also kind of maybe influences things with recruiting, given who's already kind of penciled into those spots. But that's kind of where we're at for notable players who are definitely coming back so far.
Yeah, and, you know, it helps that, you know, you had the quarterback, Dustin Crum, coming back too. I wonder who he's going to throw to, though, because Isaiah McKoy is the only MAC player to legitimately leave early. These other guys, you know, sure, they could have come back for another senior year, but this Isaiah McKoy is actually leaving after his junior year. He's so goddamn betting on himself, and I'm so happy to see that. I love when players bet on themselves like this. I don't care if it pans out or not. He's athletic as hell, and he's going to get paid for being athletic as hell. But McKoy was definitely a big reason for Crum to get all the completions that he did over the past couple of years. But he is leaving for the NFL. Manny Rugamba, his name, like I said earlier, his name was in the transfer portal, and then he immediately was like, no, I'm going to go pro. Danny Godlewski, and Tommy Doyle, all three of those players from Miami, they declared early for the NFL draft when the MAC had initially decided to axe the fall season, and then they all came back when there was going to be a season, which they only played 3 games in, unfortunately. Of those 3 guys, Rugamba obviously is going pro. Godlewski is in the transfer portal. Maybe he might be joining Rugamba in this same discussion like we're having right now. Tommy Doyle, the 2-time first-team All-MAC lineman, he right now, I don't know. So we'll see about that.
And then we already kind of talked about Caleb Huntley last week. We'll be excited to see where he's at. And we've kind of anticipated that Eskridge was going to go pro regardless. And, I mean, he needs to be talked about as a draftee. I don't know how he's being projected. I'd love to talk to people who do that for a living about where they think he is. But we saw so many plays this year that shows he is a pro caliber player. So obviously we're looking back at him as somebody who should get there. Yeah,
and like he still has to perfect his craft out there. But like I said weeks ago, he is so much better than we all expected him to be at this point. And he's got the speed. Like, speed kills, and he's definitely got it. So he's going to get a chance. I don't see him not getting a chance.
Absolutely.
But Caleb, this is our first run through of the offseason mode, and I think we did pretty good. This is pretty fun. I can't wait to keep up with the newswire with you week in and week out. Last thing before we head out, people are going to be looking out for award show information. Check out us on the Twitters. You'll see more information there, and I can't wait to reveal what we have going on there.
You should be excited because it's going to be more fun than a ball pit in an empty room. Just trying to be creepy.